We remember that. So the people were in a rebellious state with God. They were under the kingship of Nebuchadnezzar. And God, 1 in 10,000, chose the prophet Ezekiel. I want you to think about the numbers here. 1 in 10,000. God chooses him, he calls him, and then he commissions him in this type of climate. You know, we are, most of us, want to be called of God in the perfect conditions. In the big church, many members, you know, all kind of auxiliaries, or the business that's already running. You know, we want to be called of God with something that has already been established instead of relying upon God to create in us, to do through us in chaotic climates. I know in my life I can say, and I can attest, that many of the things, many of the successes that I have achieved have been in chaotic situations. So there is a level of my character that God was able to fortify in chaotic situations. I realized, I was just coming to discover, that there are some things that only a chaotic situation can birth in you. There are some things that you will not learn and mature in until you have persevered through chaotic situations. And Ezekiel, the prophet, he was commissioned in a climate of chaos. Would you ask yourself today, if God were to call me in this climate, this economic climate, God may be calling some of us to do business ventures in this chaotic economic climate. Are you going to be scared? Or are you going to trust God and do what he's telling you to do in this chaotic climate? You know, Ezekiel, he did not allow the climate of the culture and the time to hinder him. As a matter of fact, most people, I believe, in that specific cultural climate, if God would have tried to speak to them, they would have been so angry at God because they felt God allowed them to be captured into exile. So I want you to think about it. I'm trying to paint a big enough picture for you to understand the real ramifications of what's happening here as we begin in verse 3 in chapter 3. So many people were upset with God. They had been slacking. They had all kind of debauchery had been going on in the temple. God was angry, upset with the children of Israel. And he allowed them, yes he did, he allowed them to be taken captive into Babylon under the kingship of Nebuchadnezzar. And so he chooses Ezekiel, the prophet. 1 in 10,000 people. He was chosen out of 1 in 10,000. And then the Lord initiated his commission by way of divine vision. He did not cause another prophet to apprentice him. He didn't call for a king to point him out. He had a theophany, if you will. He saw God. And in seeing God, there were so many symbolic things, turn me down, there were so many symbolic things in seeing God that allowed him to really know who God was for himself. I'll say it again, he was a priest in training, 25 years old, when he was taken into captivity. So 5 years away from becoming a priest himself, and God shows up in a theophany to reveal himself to the 1 in 10,000. So Ezekiel chapter 3 is where we're going to begin. And let me say again, in this chaotic climate, God chooses he who strengthens.
Oh my God. Come on, Pastor.
In a time where the people were weak, God chooses a man whose name is God strengthens. In a time where things were weak, things were bleak, things were dim, there was little to no hope, God chooses a man, 1 in 10,000. Now you have to know that this has to be the divine providence of God. Because out of the many people that were taken capture, it was a man who God calls God strengthens. Wow. So God strengthens was also taken captive in the exile. So that when God wanted to show himself faithful, he already had the strength in So God said, I have to allow Ezekiel to be of those. Remember in chapter 2, he said, I was among them. I was among them who was taken captive. So imagine if God had allowed by some stretch of the imagination for Ezekiel not to be taken, then strength would not have been among them. But because he allowed him to be taken, strength was now among those who were weak, so that God, when he wanted to show himself, could apply the partnership to whom he calls strength. Ezekiel chapter 3. Moreover, he said unto me, Son of man, this is Ezekiel. I need to mention this. It's important to know that Ezekiel, this is the story being told by Ezekiel himself. He's telling his own story, his account of how these things took place, and that's very significant. I'm going to show you why here just shortly. Moreover, he said unto me, Son of man. Listen, in the book of Ezekiel, this term is used frequently. Son of man. God is showing us that there is a level of divinity that God gives in the prophetic partnerships. And when he speaks to Ezekiel and he says, Son of man, he's saying that you are flesh and blood, but there is a divine enablement I am going to give you. But so I'm going to remind you that you're just son of flesh. Wow. But the things I've called you to do will be divine. There'll be things that you have to have the enablement of God to accomplish. Wow. Although your name is strengthened, you're still going to need God.
Amen.
To do things. Moreover, he said unto me, Son of man, eat that thou findest, eat this roll, and go speak unto the house of Israel. Ezekiel said, so I opened my mouth, and he caused me to eat that roll. And he said unto me, Son of man, cause thy belly to eat, and fill thy bowels with this roll that I give thee. Then did I eat, and it was in my mouth as honey for sweetness. I want to go to something here. He said, and he said unto me, Son of man, cause thy belly to eat. How does your belly eat? It's called digestion. And the enzymes, when the food gets into your belly, there are enzymes that breaks down the food and distributes, listen to me closely, and distributes the nutrients to every part of your body.
Come on, man, and teach.
So God was saying to Ezekiel, listen, I need you to digest this. The scroll I'm giving you, I need you to digest this. It needs to become a part of who you are.